Hello and welcome to another Revel Coach conversation with your hosts, Allison Nissen and Marcy Stout. And today we are so lucky to have with us Henna Pryor. Henna, why don't you just jump right in and tell us what you've been up to? And we are excited to have this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And thank you to our shared friend, Casey J. Cox, for making the introduction. You got to give him a shout right from the top. What have I been up to? You're asking this at a very interesting time in my life because it sort of feels like I've been up to everything and all at once. So this past month, I have been up to bringing my book to the finish line, which has been a labor of love for the last couple of years. Honestly, part of me is like, this book has been in my head since the 5th grade. And so it's just finally getting it out into the world. So my final manuscript is due in 2 weeks. So that is the bulk of my energy. I've also been really busy with keynote speaking, which I'm grateful for. I had something like, 7 in-person engagements in the last 2 weeks of March. So it was a little nuts, but I'm super grateful about just all of the opportunities that have come up there. And honestly, right now, I am just looking forward to the warm weather. Once the manuscript is submitted, I can focus on one thing at a time for a little while, but it's an exciting year ahead. My second TEDx should be posting soon, and just I'm pumped for all the things that are coming up.
Awesome. The timing for us to interview couldn't be more perfect because I feel like we've got lots to, celebrate and talk about. Let's start with first your book. So tell us the title of the book and what it's all about. And we'd love to learn more about your book.
Yeah, I'm so excited about the book. So the book is called Good Awkward, and the subtitle is How to Embrace the Embarrassing and Celebrate the Cringe to Become the Bravest You. And for a long time, I thought, okay, what is something I can add to this conversation that hasn't been said? I work in the professional development space, personal development space, coaching, speaking, transformation. And, I've learned so much from so many brilliant thinkers in the space. And I'm so grateful for the books I've read that have changed my perspective, the speakers I've heard from, the coaches I've had. And so honestly, even though I've wanted to write a book for a long time, I hesitated because I did not want to repeat things that people have already said far more eloquently than I did. And as I kept having conversations with clients and in meetings and things, I realized the one advantage that people kept pointing out that I apparently had was this extreme willingness to stay in my awkward, fumbly, stumbly, said the wrong thing, blundery self. And I really kind of continued to listen to that comment about, because awkwardness is something that I got really used to. I was a child of immigrants. My clothes were different. My food smelled different in the cafeteria. I never quite felt like I fit in. And so really there was never a point where I eliminated awkwardness. At every inflection point of my life was, entering high school, starting my first job, starting a new job, dating, whatever it is. I realized that most people, when they have this conversation, they talk about how to eliminate this feeling of awkwardness, that it's a negative thing, that it's a bad thing. And it became very abundantly clear to me that one of the superpowers I developed in my professional success was never trying to eliminate it. And actually, I just got really good at it. And I really leaned into it and embraced it. And this thing that used to be scary became kind of part of my persona that I embraced as purposeful. And I was like, who's done a deep dive on this topic? Who's actually really looked at this specific emotion of awkwardness in a way that's lasered in and focused? Why do we feel it? Why do we fixate on it? Why do we want to run away from it? Is it useful to us in any way? So that cracked the door wide open. That became the thesis for the book and the first TEDx. And what I've learned about awkwardness is fascinating. So I'm so excited to just share all of those learnings and insights and action items with the people who feel like I do when they show up in weird situations.
What I love about it is when you first started talking about it, I was like, wow, it's almost like a new spin on authenticity where people are saying, no, you got to be your authentic self. And that's been a buzzword, for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And has been a little overplayed. And then when you start talking about embracing the awkwardness instead of shoving it away, I was like, wow, that's probably one of the best ways to coach somebody or help somebody to stay authentic, because you're not trying to shun the moments that, when you're taking a risk and it's awkward because you're introducing yourself for the first time or you stumble over your words. You're just trying to love yourself no matter what. Like that's kind of what I heard your introduction about it. It's a fascinating, I love this. I love the title. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I love the concept too.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think, I'm here for the authenticity conversation. It's been needed. It's been sorely needed in the workplace, especially. But to me, sometimes what I see and experience, and I'm sure you guys see it too, is this almost guilt that's layered on top of, I'm trying to be authentic and yet I can't. I don't know what that looks like. And,
I'm still like other people that I choose to be around. Like how am I minded and authentic when I seem
Yeah. And I've seen this uptick of, performative authenticity. I mean, you see it all the time on social media, right? These Instagram influencers with millions of followers who are purposely posting photos of themselves messy, but really the messy photo was about the most curated thing that they could have possibly done, right? So it's just, to me, the authenticity conversation, there's some people that really lean into that word and they love it and it really frees them. And for others, it feels like this skill that they don't know how to master. And they're like, why can I not do this thing that everyone is giving me permission to do? And so to your point, I think this is a little bit of an exploration of one of the major things that gets in the way of that.
Henna, I love how you say that because I'm one of those people where people say authenticity and I'm like, what is authenticity?
What is it? Right.
Like, I don't, am I doing it? Am I authentic right now? I don't know. Like, did I pass the test?
Yeah.
But when it's like awkward, it's like, okay, I am awkward. Like I get awkward. Like I totally get what that feels like. I know that the heart palpitations of like, did I just embarrass myself? Did I say the wrong thing? Is my foot like showing in my mouth somewhere? Like I get that whole idea of awkwardness versus authenticity. It's like, I'm supposed to be like calm and serene and authentic. Like I feel like it's a paradigm shift for me personally.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I can see that difference. And I just love, I love being able to say, let's embrace the awkward and just move from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So early on in the book, in the introduction, I kind of make this clear what the definitional difference is. When we think about authenticity, what we think about is what I refer to in the book is sort of our backstage self, the version of ourselves that we see, right? That's the real me. This is the version that I see. This is the real me. And we feel awkward when the version that we see on display, the version that we believe ourselves to be, the true self, comes into conflict, or there's a gap between that version and the person that we believe other people see in that moment, right? The person that's on display. So here I am, smart, capable Henna, who now says this dumb thing in the meeting. And now I think the person that other people see she's an idiot. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Like, it's so awkward for me because I feel like I'm this and now it's that. Or I'm graceful Henna who just whacked herself, while walking on the rack at the grocery store. Again, in that moment, it's the person I thought I was, not somebody who is so clumsy that she bangs herself, is at odds with the person that this stranger just observed, right? So it's this interesting exploration of this gap space of who we believe ourselves to be and who is on display in that given moment, and starting to get comfortable in that gap. I think it is a bridge to authenticity. How do we start to get more comfortable in that space so we can start to integrate the two a little bit better?
Yeah. And as you're working with your clients and audiences, what are you hearing for feedback? What are they taking away from this conversation?
Yeah, it's funny. The one big learning I've had is, and this, becomes part of the backbone of the book, is the most confident people have not eliminated awkwardness. And I think a lot of times we look up to these cool, smooth, charisma filled people as like, God, they never feel awkward. They have it, right? They have it. In fact, to the contrary, they feel just as awkward as the rest of us. They've just gotten more comfortable in that space. They've embraced it. They've leaned into it. They make it part of their persona. They own it more out loud. They're willing to say in a conversation, oh my God, cringe. Can you believe what I just said? Right? Like, that is a kind of confidence that feels attainable. And so a lot of times when I have conversations with clients, the question doesn't come up about how can I feel less awkward? The question is usually framed as, how do I feel more confident at work? How do I be more courageous? How do I take more risks? How can I be braver? But then when you back into it and you ask, well, what does confidence look like? What they describe is this sort of smooth, always together, never makes a mistake, never gets embarrassed, polished, unrealistic, unattainable version of confidence. And so where we spend time in coaching conversations and facilitations is, let's rewrite that definition for starters. Awkward confidence, I call it, awkward confidence. It's a grounded confidence. It's one that feels accessible. It feels easier to grab onto. It feels relatable. There's a cool chance I will snort on this call if you guys make me laugh. Like, it is very, very possible.
We now have a new goal.
Yeah. My hair today is a mess. I meant to wash it and I couldn't, this is the type of confidence that I feel like people for a long time haven't had permission to show or have, for fear that these bumpy edges are not desirable in the workplace, or these, less than perfect statements aren't going to land well. Where modern times have changed. I think a lot of us actually really not only love and appreciate when we see that in other people, we out loud, we say it. We really admire when other people show us their awkward edges, show us that they're uncomfortable. And yet instinctually, we struggle to let people see that in ourselves. And so that's the paradox that we sort of have to unpack and untangle in those conversations.
Henna, do you find that there's a difference between male and female awkwardness?
A little bit. Yeah. I think females, and this is, I'll try not to nerd out too much on the research, there are systemic factors at play, right? So male and female, yes, for sure. I think there's a great article on HBR, so I'll point to it, but about how confidence is often weaponized against women. So, people will say, oh, well, in the performance review, maybe you would have gotten promoted, but you didn't appear confident. But confident is defined by what, right? Brashness, directness, right? Qualities that are not necessarily superpowers naturally, nature versus nurture of women. So it almost becomes this weaponized thing that's not clearly defined. But what I have noticed is that with women, just studies, and I cite some of them in the book, self-doubt is higher in women. Self-doubt it is. And confidence in women, especially this sort of awkward confidence, is characterized more by, being able to take tiny action steps ahead. With men, there is still, from a general standpoint, more leeway for a man, especially a man in leadership, to have awkwardness almost as a persona that is allowed. So think about, the nerdy tech leader, right? The Bill Gates, like, he's allowed to be awkward. Or it could be the creative with the tattoos. He's allowed to be awkward, right? It almost becomes part of their persona. For women, this is funny. I talked to the co-CEO of Chief, which is a large women's organization, about this. And we sat here as part of the book interview. We brainstormed, like, who is the persona of an awkward, kind of like less than perfect and smooth C-suite woman? We could not think of one. Right? We could not think of a single one that is celebrated for that sort of persona. The only people we could think of were the Mindy Kalings and the Tina Feys, who have taken that awkwardness and made it part of their character. And the rub is that these are two women, just the two that I named, who are brilliant and hardworking and super smart, who were able to use it as part of their persona because of the career that they're in. And yet women are not afforded the same leeway to be that way, to let those parts show, because of some of the systemic scrutiny that they fall under when they do. So there's still, it is not a level playing field. And I look forward to the day that it is.
So starting this conversation that you're starting, with the book and with the platform and speaking, it's like you're starting a new movement. Where do you say people help join you on the movement to help embrace the awkward and, not make certain women leaders have to feel like they need to be a certain level of perfection to show confidence and something like that? Like how do you recommend people get started?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I hope it does become a movement. So you use that word and it makes me tingle. Like, I hope so,
not snort, but tingle.
Sure. Yeah, no. And selfishly, I have a 13-year-old daughter, my firstborn, I have a child who I hope is part of the movement too. I've written this book for professionals, but really, people who have been my beta readers are like, I need my teenage daughter to read this, and so I think there's a few different places where I hope the movement starts to build. First and foremost, social media hashtags and all that are cute, but normalize this stuff in the workplace. Part of what I introduce as far as the action steps in the book are create moments at work to embrace the awkward. So actually have, at the beginning of a meeting, have a bad idea brainstorm where literally absurd ideas that people are like, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, right? That's allowed and encouraged. People need to build awkward tolerance. They need to build the muscle about, I'm going to put myself out there and it's likely to look pretty dumb or embarrassing or cringy, right? We need to create more opportunities for people to build that muscle. Other versions that I suggest are things like, having team building activities focused on everyone in that room doing something they've never done before. So I do a leadership workshop where I have teams write poetry, and people are like, Henna, why poetry? Because I don't work with many business people who are good at writing poetry, right? For them, they're like, this is going to be terrible. And I'm like, probably, right? It's probably going to be really terrible. And they're all fidgety and cringy about, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare. And then by the end, they're laughing and they're high-fiving and it's a huge confidence builder, but we don't often enough create spaces to do these things. So, I hope those who read the book feel empowered to bring some of these activities to their own teams and workplaces to try to build awkward muscle, to allow people to lean into these edges so that when they are in a meeting and they need to flex it, it's not the first time they've done it, right? This muscle is fired up a couple of times before.
And so as we decide to flex our little muscles and become comfortable with awkward, with Revel Coach, we always talk about stopping to celebrate every little thing, every little moment. So how do you recommend, at what point do you start to celebrate and you say, yes, I got the high fives and all that, but when you're out there and you do that awkward thing, and then, is it a time you can go, you know what, I just did an awkward thing and you know what, that's cool. Okay. I'm good.
Yeah. We literally do this. So I currently lead a mastermind. We've got 12 amazing women in it. And one of the things that I require of them, I don't even say encourage, I require of them in every meeting is, I love how much you and Marcy love this idea of celebrating things. I require them to share wins every time we meet. And specifically, my favorite ones are process focused as it relates to awkwardness. So if you tell me you raised your hand and you tried something, even if you cringed the whole way, right? And in the book, in the TEDx, I call it the cringe chasm, right? If you crossed the cringe chasm, I could care less whether or not it worked. Right? Like I could care less whether or not the result was what you wanted, but if you had that butterfly in your stomach and you did the thing and you did it anyway, that's what I want to celebrate. I want to take a minute and stop and acknowledge that and celebrate that, because the only way to get people to keep building muscle is to celebrate the process, right? So 100%, whether it's in a room of friends, like share an embarrassment. Did it work? Did it feel great in the moment? Probably did not feel great in the moment. But just to be able to put it out there, diffuse it, own it, know that you survived it. That's how we start to take the, spotlight effect of these situations and release its power a little bit. And when they happen, the one thing about awkwardness too, is we feel like it's just us. We feel like there's no way all these other confident people feel this way. There's no way everyone else's face is as red as I am. And it's just not true. It's just not true. A year of me digging into the research on this, we could not be more wrong. The most confident people feel this as acutely as we do. They just have strategies on how to manage it and come back faster. And that's the goal, not getting rid of it.
That's wonderful.
Go on. No, I was going to say, I get through a lot of awkward moments by saying, I cannot possibly be the first person that ever experienced this.
Yeah. And you're not. I think that's the funny realization that people have is the people they admire most have it in just as much, frequency and just as much intensity. It's not about avoiding it. It's about the comeback rate. It's about expecting it. Anytime you move to your next inflection point of growth, you are inviting the awkwardness in. Anytime, if you are trying to stretch and grow, you are inviting it in. It's a byproduct. It's coming, right? And part of you is going to need to start to get excited about that inevitable awkwardness, because it means you're doing something, right? You're growing, you're stretching. When we don't prepare for it to come, then it knocks us over, right? Then we're not ready for it. We're not expecting it. So really, this is about bringing this part of the conversation to the forefront so that we know it is coming. If you're playing small and safe and not growing at all, you can avoid it for a while, right? Life is going to still happen to you. You can't avoid it entirely. You can avoid the planned awkwardness, the things that come with growth, You're still not going to be able to avoid the unplanned awkwardness. So that's still going to happen. But there's some that you can avoid. But anybody who's trying to grow, to hit goals, to move forward in their life, it's part of the territory. So it's more just now, how do we prepare for those rather than react to them? That's to me the learning edge.
So Henna, I'd love to go back with this same conversation, but as it relates to daughters.
Yeah.
So middle school is no longer like the middle school that my daughter was going through. We could kind of control her social media, and we had all the things to turn it off. And now it's just impossible. It's on every device, and even homework is expected to be on devices. So I find with embracing the awkward, kids are in this strange, like two different worlds where they overshare everything, but they really overthink things, you know, in a certain way that I struggle sometimes understanding what it's like to grow up in their world. Yeah. And like, I feel like as I hear you talking, embrace the awkward, like that's where I want kids to take more risks. I want them like, this is your age, like you're 20, you know, that's try an internship, fail, try another one, you know, like go for certain things, go for jobs. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts as to, you know, specifically middle school daughter, since that's where you are.
Yeah. Well, okay. So first I'll just own out of the gate. I am not a child psychologist, and boy, do I wish I was, because my daughter's in 7th grade. Right. So I'm feeling all of this with you. What I will say, we do incorporate into our house, you know, as someone who has a mother who's an executive coach, who's writing a book about awkwardness. Of course, my daughter, Layla, is not immune from this conversation. So what we do, to Allison's earlier point, is we do try to implement certain talk tracks and conversations in our home that are designed to celebrate the process of awkwardness. So my favorite way of doing this is we've got 3 dinner table conversations, 2 that really don't have to do with that, and then the last one that does. So our 3 dinner table conversation questions are: what was the best part of your day? What's something new you learned? But then this is the one that relates most: what's something that gave you butterflies today? So the kids know it's coming every day. What's something that gave you butterflies today? So it's a 2-parter. They know that when they tell us, I didn't really want to raise my hand for this thing, but I did, even though everybody was staring at me and I knew I could have gotten it wrong. You know, we're going to celebrate that because they did something that was a little embarrassing, a little cringy, a little nerve-wracking. So it's building in that celebration. And B, when they know that question is coming, they're looking for those opportunities, right? They know mom's going to ask, they know dad's going to ask. So it's sort of priming their brain first thing in the morning to look for those opportunities. So for me, if I think about muscle building, it's priming them to look for them. Now, you know, every day, does Layla have one where she says, I did the thing and it was cringy? No, but she knows that we're very thrilled when she does. And so I think what we're trying to condition in her is butterfly feelings when they feel, you know, safe, not threatening, but butterfly feelings are worthy of celebration in this house. And, you know, middle schoolers do not celebrate that. Middle schoolers, you know, it's complacence.
They hide.
Yeah, acceptance from their peers. God, I remember being in that age. So I know how difficult that can be. And I'll just say, from a social media standpoint, you know, I don't know that every parent has a different strategy on this. I just try to counterbalance the filtered life with actual videos. You know, I show her videos of things like models and stuff who, you know, before all they are brushing, and then what they actually look like when they sit down, and what they actually talk about with their friends at dinner. I try to find, there's some great, for all the terrible stuff on Instagram and whatnot, there are some models that really like to keep it very real about, here's the edited photo and here's what I look like when I sit down, like everybody else looks, you know? And so I think anytime she gets a little, I can tell when she gets a little just lost in the fakeness of all of that, I try to calibrate with her about what's actually real. And we just try to talk about it a lot. It's hard.
That's great. I mean, I always kind of feel like, you know, the expression comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah.
And if you're on Instagram, you see somebody else doing something, and if your heart's like, that's awesome, good for you, next, then you're in the right lane. But when you start comparing and you start saying, oh, I should go on a vacation, or look at her outfit, and it's a twinge negative, that's when you got to shut it down.
Yeah. And then go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know, another thing we were talking about earlier, which is somewhat on the same theme, a lot of times social media, people are trying to put out celebrations and wins, you know, and it's a form of, you know, if it's an entrepreneur, she or he has to kind of show to their clients the results they're getting. So it's a part of the expectation of branding, and people want to get to know you. But then again, people are awkward about celebrating. They don't want to brag. And you had such an interesting perspective of celebrating and kind of why we struggle with celebrating. And I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I hope that soon after this episode airs that the second TEDx that I did will air, because this will hopefully shed a lot of light on this, but I'll share my take. So my second TEDx, it's called The New Way to Brag in a Modern World and Feel Good Doing It. So that's the title. It'll be out soon. And what you've said, I think, is so important, especially now with so many of us working remote, working hybrid. Humility is good. Humility in too high a dose is problematic, because women especially and disproportionately do not celebrate their wins because they don't want to come across as braggy. They don't want to come across as boasty. They think it's not going to make them likable. And to that point, certain types of bragging are not very likable. People are not warm towards certain types of braggarts. So, in this hybrid world where we know we need to share our wins, we need to appear competent, get results, like you said, these wins for my clients. How do we share our wins without looking bad, without what the world is telling us bragging is bad? And so what I discovered in the research for the TEDx was that there's a little bit of an art and science to it, right? When we think about bragging in the traditional sense, what we think of is what I'm describing as bad bragging, which is, here's what I did, this is why I'm great. Or even worse, the humble bragging, which is like, hey, here's the thing that I did, but not really. Like, I don't know how I got such a big bonus, and everybody else worked just as hard. We can all see through that, because it's bad bragging is focused on validation. We want other people to validate us for our competence. We want other people to see what we've done and celebrate our wins that we had. Validate me for what I've done. That's bad bragging. The difference between bad bragging and good bragging boils down to intention. So the intention for bad bragging is, I'm looking for that validation. I want people to prop me up for what I did. But when it comes to good bragging, what we're actually doing is celebrating socially. We're celebrating our wins and we're celebrating the wins of others. So the intention is not solo validation, it's social celebration. So I'll just make this very real. I brag all the time. I love to share my wins. As a woman of color, it's important that I share my wins. And as I talk about in the TEDx, I don't have a million haters. Like I should, the amount that I share my wins, but I don't. But the reason why is I'm constantly gassing up other people. So in the same frequency that I'm talking about the things that went well for me, I'm also telling all my friends that they worked so hard. Look at what happened. This is amazing. I post about them. I, scream louder than they do about their own wins. And so when you share wins in that collective spirit, in that social celebration, it helps me appear competent, capable, really good at what they do, and warm and likable, because everyone loves to be celebrated. So it's really about that dual strategy. There's a whole study out of George Mason where they say, instead of solo promotion or self-promotion and other promotion, we do dual promotion. So let's brag about me, and Allison and Marcy, let's brag about you too, right? And then it just becomes this love fest and it feels good to everyone.
That's great. And especially because I feel like people do want to know what's going on. And if there isn't somebody actually saying it, yourself, they won't know. And so you're cutting yourself off from a connection with people and cutting them off from an opportunity to celebrate you, which it feels.
And increasingly in this digital world, my one-liner that I can't ever stop saying is, how will we know if you don't tell us? I don't sit next to you. I can't hear you. How will I know if you don't tell me? And that part is painful when I find out that somebody's done something incredible and no one knows about it. Like, breaks my heart. So we have to have a hedge against that tendency. And this is one way to hedge it.
That's wonderful. Well, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I would love to, before we close, just ask some questions if somebody want to get in touch with you. So you work with companies, individuals, speaking, give us a little insight of the types of clients you work with.
Yeah, thank you for asking. I would say the majority of my weeks and months lately are spent on the speaking circuit. I've increasingly kept my schedule busy with that. So if you're part of any organization that's looking for a speaker, on confidence, on risk taking, I actually do a lot too with sales, persuasion, influence, things like that. I would love certainly to be in touch. I'm all over LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Henna Pryor on LinkedIn. That's my preferred playground as far as social media. So love to make new friends there. I'm on Instagram, same thing, Henna Pryor. And yeah, I got a lot of fun, projects, keynotes, workshops for teams coming up for 2023, some that have been big hits for the last year, some new ones. So if anyone's looking for just professional development that's fresh and interesting and fun, I would love to have a conversation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate this conversation. And on behalf of my sister, Allison, and I, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. And congratulations on your book. Good luck with everything, like the final stretch and the TED Talk. And there's so many great things to celebrate.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Bye.
Talk about awkward goodbyes.
Revel Coach is a collaborative platform that builds leadership programs for entrepreneurs, coaches, executives, and authors. For more information, visit us at revelcoach.com and follow us on LinkedIn to never miss an update.